A single mom was dragged out of her ex-fiance's wedding until a millionaire grabbed the mic and proposed to her. The chandeliers above gleamed coldly, casting sterile light over the grand ballroom dressed in roses and gold. Laughter echoed as the wedding ceremony of Charleston's most anticipated union prepared to begin. Guests in polished shoes and sparkling gowns whispered behind their glasses of champagne. Mark stood confidently beneath the floral arch, his tuxedo crisp, smile poised. Beside him, the daughter of a prominent political family, his soon-to-be bride, radiating elegance in a pearl-encrusted gown. Then the doors opened. Not a dramatic push, not a storming entrance, just the quiet creak of wood and the sharp cut of silence that followed. Heads turned, and then gasps rippled like a tide. Eliza stood in the doorway. She wore a plain beige dress, wrinkled at the hem. Her hair, once long and shining, was pulled back into a loose bun. In her arms she held a newborn wrapped in a blue blanket. His tiny fingers curled against her collarbone, his small face peaceful. Mark's face blanched. "Eliza?" he murmured, disbelief clouding his features. She stepped forward, her voice soft but unwavering. "Mark? Your son has a right to be known. You promised you would not turn your back on him." Whispers grew louder. Someone dropped a champagne flute. From the front row, Mark's mother rose slowly, her expression sharp. "You dare come here to this wedding uninvited with this child?" Eliza looked straight at Mark. "You said when he was born you would make things right." Mark's jaw clenched. He turned his head slightly, catching the eye of the officiant, then his bride, who stared between them with mounting horror. "You should not have come," he said, voice low. "You're causing a scene." Eliza's arms tightened protectively around the baby. "I wrote you, I called, you never answered. I gave you every chance." "I have nothing to say to you," Mark replied coldly. "You chose your path. You knew we came from different worlds." The child stirred, beginning to fuss. Eliza gently rocked him, her voice cracking. "He is your son." Mark took a step back. "This is not my responsibility anymore." At that moment, his mother raised her hand and signaled the security guard standing by the door. "Get her out," she ordered sharply. "This is a private event." The guards approached. Eliza instinctively stepped back, her body shielding the infant. "Do not touch me," she said, trembling. "Please." The guests watched, some turning away in discomfort, others whispering with cruel delight. Mark's fiancée stood frozen, her hands gripping her bouquet, watching as the woman who came before her was publicly dismantled. "Mark," Eliza said one last time, eyes shining. "Look at him." But Mark did not. The guards each took one arm, firm but not violent. "Let's go, ma'am," one of them said. The baby began to cry, loud, distressed, and Eliza tried to soothe him even as she was pulled back. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Shh, Noah, it's okay. I'm here." Tears slipped down her face as the double doors opened again, ready to swallow her and the child whole. Then someone spoke. "Wait." A man in a dark navy suit stood from his seat in the third row. His voice cut through the ballroom like a scalpel, calm, authoritative. Gabriel Monroe, CEO of a major holdings firm, silent partner in 3 of Mark's ventures, one of the most respected names in the room. He walked forward slowly, every eye turning to follow him. "This is not how we treat people," Gabriel said, his voice steady, especially not the mother of a child who clearly did not get here alone. Mark stepped forward quickly. "Gabriel, this is personal. Please stay out of it." Gabriel looked at Mark, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the guards. "Let her go." They hesitated, glancing at Mark's mother, who fumed in silence. But Gabriel's word carried weight, too much to ignore. The guards released her. Gabriel offered Eliza a handkerchief. "No child should cry alone," he said gently. Eliza took it, not speaking, eyes wide with shock. Gabriel turned to the crowd. "Let this wedding continue however it must. But let it be known, truth is not something we remove from the room. It is something we face." The room remained hushed. No applause, no outrage, just silence. Mark turned away, and Eliza, standing with her child, was no longer invisible. A different kind of ceremony had just begun. The tension inside the ballroom lingered like a fog that refused to lift. Eliza stood frozen just feet from the exit, her baby cradled tightly in her arms, the guards having released her, but the humiliation lingering on her skin like smoke after fire. Mark had already turned away, adjusting his cufflinks like nothing had happened. The ceremony was meant to resume, but it did not, because from among the glittering guests, one man stood up. He moved without urgency, yet commanded every eye. In a tailored charcoal suit and no tie, his presence was understated, until he reached the edge of the aisle and climbed the few steps onto the stage. Murmurs spread like electricity. "That's Gabriel King. Isn't he one of Mark's business partners?" No one interrupts a wedding, especially not him. Gabriel took the microphone from the shocked officiant, who instinctively stepped back, unsure whether to intervene. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes, sharp and unwavering, locked onto Eliza. He turned to the crowd. "I know this is not the moment any of you expected," he began, voice steady, every word landing like a stone dropped in still water. "And I know that none of you came here to witness anything other than a perfectly orchestrated ceremony, but sometimes the truth walks in uninvited." Mark moved forward. His face flushed. "Gabriel, this is not your place." Gabriel cut him off, his voice firmer now. "It became my place the moment you let that woman be dragged out of here like a criminal, in front of your future wife, your guests, and your son." A collective gasp went through the room. Eliza's lips parted slightly. She held Noah closer, as if uncertain whether to run or cry. "I do not know her," Gabriel said, gesturing to Eliza. "Not her name, not her story, but I know what I saw. I know the look in her eyes. That was not manipulation, that was heartbreak." Mark laughed bitterly. "This is none of your business." Gabriel faced him fully now, his voice lower but ironclad. "On the contrary, you and I sat across from each other in boardrooms. We shook hands on million-dollar deals. You told me about legacy, about values. And today I saw what those words mean to you." Mark's bride shifted uncomfortably behind him, her fingers tightening on the bouquet. Cameras began to lift, phones tilted silently. This was no longer just a wedding. It was a reckoning. Gabriel looked back at Eliza and then stepped forward slowly. His tone softened, but carried even more weight. A man does not abandon the people he once called family. He does not pretend he never said, "I love you," just because it no longer benefits him. And he certainly does not turn his back on his child because of embarrassment. Eliza's breath caught. Caltro too. Gabriel turned back to the crowd and said clearly, "I do not know her, but I know one thing for sure. Real men do not walk away from their own children." The room fell absolutely still. Mark's mother opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The officiant stood frozen, still holding the edge of his script. Gabriel stepped down from the stage, slowly walking toward Eliza. He stopped just a few feet in front of her and gently reached out one hand, not to touch her, but simply to offer the gesture of support. "My name is Gabriel King," he said quietly, "and I am sorry for what happened to you here today." Eliza blinked, stunned. Gabriel turned toward the nearest usher. "Bring her a chair, and some water. She stays." A young waiter moved quickly to follow the command. Eliza, too overwhelmed to speak, simply nodded and allowed herself to be seated. Noah had calmed again, his tiny hand resting against her chest. Gabriel looked back toward the altar. "If anyone believes this wedding can go on like nothing happened, you are mistaken." Mark sputtered. "You're jeopardizing everything." Gabriel's voice didn't rise. It did not need to. "You did that yourself." He turned his back to the stage and sat down beside Eliza, without another word. In that moment, he became something more than a businessman or a stranger with a microphone. He became the first person in a long time who stood beside her, not out of pity, but principle. Under the glaring sunlight beyond the elegant Charleston wedding venue, Eliza clutched her infant son to her chest. Gabriel's coat was wrapped around them both, a shield from the stares and the sting of shame. Her breaths came fast, her cheeks flushed, but she stood tall. She had been dragged out like a scandal, but she was still a mother. still responsible for the tiny life in her arms. Gabriel led her to the garden behind the estate, his calm, steady presence a quiet contrast to the chaos inside. They reached a shaded bench beneath an old oak tree. Without a word, he handed her a clean handkerchief. She hesitated, then took it, dabbing her eyes. Noah had stopped crying, comforted by the coat's warmth and Gabrielle's quiet voice. "I do not know what that was," Eliza said hoarsely, "but thank you." Gabrielle leaned forward, elbows on his knees. It was what needed to be done. "Why?" she asked. "Because no child should see his mother treated like that. And because silence in the face of cruelty is complicity." Eliza studied him. Gabriel King, she had heard his name from Mark, had seen him mentioned in business reports. But this version of him, this man sitting beside her, was something entirely different. "You were a guest?" "I was," he said. "My company had a deal with Hale Enterprises. Not anymore." "You ended it?" "I sent the order before we left the room. We're auditing every tie." Her eyes widened. "You could lose millions." He looked at her calmly. "And you nearly lost your dignity. Money can be regained. Character is harder." She was quiet, the weight of months pressing against her chest. "I lost my job," she said suddenly. "Once rumors spread, the school said it would upset donors. I tried retail, but no one wants a single mom with drama. Even the church closed its doors." Gabriel stayed silent, just listening. "I sold my ring for diapers," she whispered. "Ate rice so Noah could have formula." Still, he said nothing. But then he reached into his pocket and placed a small bottle of hand sanitizer beside her. Gently, he adjusted the coat around Noah's feet. "Why are you being kind?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because someone should have been." For a while, they sat in silence, broken only by Noah's soft breaths and the leaves rustling overhead. Gabriel's phone buzzed. He stood and said, "I have things to handle, but I am not leaving you alone." "What do you mean?" "I'm sending a car to take you home. Tomorrow someone from my team will call. It is not charity, it's a beginning." He looked down at Noah. "That boy deserves a future that starts with someone saying yes." Then, looking at her, he added, "And you deserve someone in your corner." Eliza watched him go, not like a wealthy man offering sympathy, but like someone who had chosen a side. For the first time in months, she let herself believe maybe they were not entirely alone anymore. The storm did not wait long. By sunrise the next day, Eliza's name was plastered across tabloids and gossip sites. Headlines screamed in bold, "Unhinged woman crashes Charleston wedding. Claims baby belongs to groom." The photos were everywhere. Eliza's anguished face, mid-shout, her arms wrapped tightly around a crying Noah as security dragged her from the venue. But none of the clips showed her quiet conversation with Mark beforehand. None captured his cold denial. The media made it look like a spectacle, a public breakdown, a woman desperate for attention. Eliza sat on the edge of her borrowed bed in her tiny apartment, scrolling through the onslaught with trembling hands. Her inbox was flooded with messages. Some were filled with hate. "You should be ashamed. Stay away from that poor baby." Others were threats. "We know where you live. Keep your crazy mouth shut." Noah stirred in his bassinet beside her. She turned the phone screen down, wiped her face, and whispered, "I'm so sorry, baby. I just wanted you to have a name." She did not answer her door all day. Not the delivery man, not the neighbors, not even the volunteer from the local center who came to check on her. But someone was watching. Gabriel sat in his car just down the block, his jaw tight as he read the media coverage himself. He had expected backlash, but not this violence, not this twisting of reality. His phone buzzed. It was his executive assistant. "Sir, you're being advised not to respond. Legal says any public comment could be interpreted as taking sides in a personal dispute." "This isn't a personal dispute," Gabriel said sharply. "It's character assassination." "I understand, but—" "Prepare a statement," he said. "No, not a statement. An expose. I want every record we have from the Hale accounts. Cross-section it with public data. Find me the funds, the contracts, the NDAs they tried to bury." There was a pause. Then, "Yes, sir." Gabriel ended the call and exhaled slowly, his hand tightening on the steering wheel. He thought of Eliza's eyes, hollow with shock but still holding on to something fiercely alive. She had been brave enough to walk into a room full of enemies for the sake of her son. Now it was his turn to step forward. Within 48 hours, a detailed investigative article appeared on the front page of the Herald Ledger, signed by Gabriel King himself. It laid out the financial ties between King Industries and Hale Enterprises, how those had come under review after internal discrepancies. It exposed suspicious personal disbursements made from company accounts, some under the label external settlement, tracing one back to Eliza Lane, a transfer labeled simply confidential care. Gabriel never used Eliza's name in vain. He did not call out Mark directly, but he let the numbers speak. He let the readers connect the dots. The fallout was instant. Board members of Hale Enterprises called emergency meetings. Former partners issued statements distancing themselves from the scandal. Investors began pulling out. But Gabriel was not finished. He called a press conference. Dressed in a simple gray suit, with no entourage or fanfare, he stepped up to the podium in front of a room packed with reporters. Cameras flashed as they anticipated a war of words. But Gabriel's tone was calm, his eyes steady. "I was there that day," he began. "I saw a woman being dragged out of a celebration, not because she disrupted it, but because her presence reminded people of a truth they tried to bury." He paused. "Since then, she's been called unstable, hysterical, mentally unfit." He let that sink in. It's easier, I suppose, to call someone crazy than to admit they were right. It's easier to brand a mother attention-seeking than to face the shame of breaking a promise made in private. A reporter called out, "Mr. King, are you confirming her claims?" Gabriel looked out over the sea of microphones and didn't flinch. "I'm confirming that I saw a woman with nothing left to lose walk into a room full of power and lies, holding her baby in her arms, and demand only truth. That does not sound like instability to me. That sounds like courage." Cameras flashed again. And if our definition of sanity is to smile politely while being erased, Gabriel continued, then maybe it is time we redefine what it means to be kind. There was no applause, just silence. Deep, reverent silence. Later that evening, Eliza received a simple email. It had no subject line, just a link. She clicked it, watched the press conference, and for the first time since the wedding, her tears were not of shame, but of disbelief. She stared at the screen, at Gabriel standing tall, not as a hero, but as an ally. He had not spoken for her, he had spoken with her. Eliza did not return to the spotlight. She could have. After Gabriel's press conference, after the public vindication, she could have chosen the talk shows, the interviews, the shiny social media campaigns about overcoming disgrace. But she did not want to win by shouting louder. She wanted to build something real. So she walked away from it all and into a modest brick building at the end of a narrow road in North Charleston, the Sunrise Center, a tiny nonprofit school for children with disabilities and difficult home lives. It did not look like much from the outside. The paint peeled in places, the roof leaked when it rained, and the supply closet was mostly empty. But to Eliza, it felt like something she could heal alongside herself. She became a teacher, not by contract, but by heart. Every morning she arrived early, cradling Noah in one arm and a pile of hand-me-down teaching materials in the other. She taught letters by singing, numbers with sidewalk chalk. Hope through the way she smiled, even when sleep-deprived. Her students adored her. The parents, most of them single, struggling, or just invisible to the world, saw in her someone who did not pity them but stood beside them. And all the while, Gabriel watched from the distance. He never stepped foot into the school, never offered her a check in person. But quietly, week by week, things began to change. A new roof appeared. Not flashy, just sturdy. The broken heater in room 4 began working again. Then came fresh books, art supplies, and sensory tools that Eliza had once only dreamed of. She asked the director who was behind it. The woman shrugged. "Some anonymous donor. We'd just say thank you and keep going." Eliza had a feeling, but she said nothing, until one morning she arrived to find something resting on her desk, a tiny pair of baby walking shoes, pale blue, with little clouds stitched along the soles. Tucked beside them was a folded note. She opened it slowly. For Noah, when he learns to walk, at the place where his mother teaches others how to walk through storms. There was no signature, but she did not need one. She stood there for a long moment, the shoes in her hand, the note pressed to her chest. Her eyes burned. Then, gently, she placed the shoes on the shelf above her desk and began her lesson. That afternoon, the sky broke into rain. Recess was ending when she saw Jonah, one of her students with spina bifida, struggling near the edge of the playground, his wheelchair stuck in a patch of wet grass. His face twisted, not from pain but frustration. Without hesitation, Eliza ran to him. Her dress soaked, her hair clinging to her face. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. "You're not stuck," she said softly. "We're just not done yet." Together, they got the chair moving again, inch by inch. Someone captured a photo. Eliza kneeling in the rain, holding the boy in one arm, steadying the wheels with the other. Her smile wasn't for the camera, it was for him. The next day, she received a message request in her inbox. It was from a journalist, the same one who had written the first hit piece on her after the wedding incident. The message was short. "I owe you an apology. I believed what they told me. I forgot to ask what you wanted to say. I am sorry." Eliza read it once, then again. She did not reply immediately, not with anger, not with bitterness. Instead, she uploaded the photo taken the day before, no caption at first. Then she added, "I do not need your apology. I just need you not to hurt the ones who cannot speak for themselves." She sent it, then turned off her phone. That night, as she put Noah to sleep, she whispered a truth to the quiet room. "We are okay," she said, "and we are not alone." She did not know where Gabriel was, or if he would ever say more, but what he had done was louder than words. He had watched her rebuild her life and simply added a few bricks to the foundation, without permission, without spotlight, just presence. And that, to Eliza, was the kind of strength she could trust. Gabriel King had always been known for his calm precision, never dramatic, never impulsive. So when he called for an emergency meeting with the board of his investment firm and publicly declared the termination of all current and future partnerships with Hale Enterprises, it sent waves through every corner of the business world. But that was only the beginning. In the days that followed, Gabriel made quiet moves behind the scenes. He purchased a controlling stake in Bright Minds Collective, a small chain of nonprofit education centers, once mocked by Mark Hale as a waste of investor oxygen. These centers served underserved children, many with disabilities, many like the students Eliza taught each day. Gabriel did not change the name. He expanded the mission, and he announced a new collaborative framework. Bright Minds would now partner with local grassroots organizations across the Southeast, including the Sunrise Center, Eliza's school. It was not charity, it was vision. He poured in resources, hired veteran educators, and ensured that each child had access to therapy, meals, and mentorship. And for every meeting, every launch, every article published, Gabriel refused to make himself the headline. He insisted the camera turn to the teachers, the parents, the students. But some things could not stay in the shadows. Mark Hale had made enemies over the years, not just personal, but fiscal. And when Gabriel's internal audit team began combing through the books, they uncovered a pattern of misappropriated funds, backdoor dealings, and ghost partnerships that painted a damning picture. It culminated in a private shareholders' meeting turned very public, when Gabriel walked into the room with a full report in hand and addressed the board of Hale Enterprises. He did not raise his voice. He did not gloat. He simply outlined each finding with clarity, then paused. "Gentlemen," he said, "this is not about vengeance. It is about responsibility, about what kind of world we are building with our capital." Mark stood at the far end of the table, face pale, jaw locked. For the first time, he had no words. A vote was held. The majority moved to remove Mark from his executive post and suspend his board privileges indefinitely, pending further investigation. Outside the building, reporters were waiting. They circled Gabriel, flashing lights in his face, shouting questions. "Is this a personal move? Are you defending the woman from the wedding scandal?" Gabriel paused, scanning the faces before him, then leaned into the microphone. "I did not do this for Eliza," he said. "I did it because business must be better than this, because power is not a shield for abuse. It is a tool to build with." Another reporter stepped forward. "But do you deny this decision was influenced by her story?" Gabriel looked out at the crowd. Then he said clearly, "No one needs a podium to prove their worth. I have seen a woman spend her days in a leaky schoolroom with children who do not speak, who cannot always move, and bring them I have seen her rebuild her life without demanding anyone watch." He drew a slow breath. "That is not scandal. That is strength." The next morning, every headline read some version of the same thing. "King breaks with Hale, invests in future of education." But none of them printed the words Gabriel kept in his private notebook that night. She never asked to be rescued. She just needed space to rise. Back in Charleston, Eliza did not speak of the boardroom drama. She only noticed that her classroom now had working Wi-Fi, a new set of books on emotional learning, and an anonymous envelope with vouchers for every student to receive free eye exams and glasses if needed. She smiled at the envelope, then returned to her lesson. Some revolutions do not come with banners. Some begin with the soft clatter of a pencil in a child's hand, learning to write their own name for the first time. And in the margins of that quiet victory, Gabriel stood, not in front of her, not above her, but beside her, always just close enough to catch her if she ever needed it, but far enough to let her fly on her own. Gabriel never called too often. He did not send flowers or grand texts. He showed up quietly, through action, not attention. Eliza did not chase him either. Her days were full, teaching, wiping tears, tying shoes, adjusting the grip of a crayon in the tiny hand of a child who could not yet speak. But somewhere in the rhythm of those days, she felt his presence, as if the sun streaming through the cracked window pane had learned his stillness. There were no late-night declarations, no predictable courtship, just space, and in that space, something true took root. It had been weeks since the last press storm. The world had moved on to newer stories. Yet Gabriel had not. He had simply stepped further into the background of her life, never pushing, only observing, always preparing. Then came a Tuesday morning like any other. Eliza arrived early to unlock the classroom. Rain had fallen the night before, and the scent of damp earth clung to the playground. As she passed the hallway leading to the school's modest art room, something caught her eye. Something framed. Something new. She stepped closer. On the wall, in warm oils and soft brushstrokes, was a painting. It showed her sitting cross-legged beside a boy, Noel, one of her students with autism, guiding his trembling hand as he filled in the wings of a butterfly with blue. The moment had been real, months ago, but forgotten in the blur of daily work. Somehow it had been captured, lit from behind by golden sunlight streaming through the old window. Below the canvas, engraved in gold on the wooden frame, was a line, "They call me a savior, but I am just someone learning how to live, taught by a woman who never leaves the ones the world forgets." There was no signature, only a folded note taped to the corner. Eliza opened it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was steady, familiar. It read, "If you will have me, not as a hero, not as a name, but as your teammate, then from this day forward let us build something for those who once believed they were undeserving of a second chance. No flowers, no ring, just truth." She stared at the note, then back at the painting, her vision blurring. For years she had been fighting to prove her worth, as a mother, as a woman, as someone whose story had once been twisted into a scandal. But this was not pity. This was not rescue. This was someone saying, "You do not need to prove anything anymore." Her knees gave slightly beneath her, and she sat down right there on the hallway floor, clutching the note to her chest, tears streaming silently down her cheek. For the first time in her life, Eliza cried not because she was broken, but because someone saw her whole and stayed. 1 year later, the grand estate where Eliza had once been dragged out in shame no longer echoed with crystal chandeliers or hollow toasts. The ballroom had been transformed, no longer a shrine to appearances, but a home for purpose. Where once rose petals littered the aisle of a wedding that betrayed her, now colorful floor mats welcomed small feet, wheelchairs, and walkers. The banner read, "Noah's Light, Integrated Learning and Family Center." It was a place for children with disabilities, learning challenges, and families who could not afford specialized care. Named not after a donor or a founder, but after a child who was born into silence and turned that silence into light. Eliza stood near the front of the playground, flanked by teachers in blue polos, small hands tugging gently at her coat. She knelt to tie the shoe of a boy with cerebral palsy. His fingers curled into her sleeve for balance. Around her, murals painted by local artists showed children with all abilities, running, laughing, dreaming. Gabriel stood nearby in a gray blazer, speaking softly with the donor, but his eyes were only on her. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, local officials and families gathered in folding chairs beneath white canopies. The media came too, but this time, not to distort a scandal, but to cover a story of rebirth. Eliza stepped up to the microphone, her hands calm, her voice sure. "Exactly 1 year ago," she began, "I stood on these same grounds as someone no one wanted to hear. I was told I did not belong, that I had ruined something sacred." A pause. Her eyes swept across the crowd, at children bouncing on the adaptive trampoline, at Noah playing with a sensory board beside the stage. "But today," she continued, "we open the doors to those who have too often been told they are too much or not enough, children who were left behind, mothers who were silenced, families who were told they did not deserve a seat at the table." Her voice trembled for a heartbeat, then steadied. "This place is not a second chance. It is a first chance for everyone who was never given one." Applause rang through the courtyard. Then, before the echoes could fade, Gabriel stepped forward. He did not carry a bouquet, just a small velvet box worn at the corners. "I was that child once," he said, speaking without a microphone. "The one left alone in a school that did not understand me. I remember sitting in a hallway, waiting for someone, anyone, to say, 'You matter.'" His eyes found hers. "I grew up learning how to speak business, how to win. But I never learned how to feel seen until I met a woman who could teach a child to find joy in a crayon, who could make a boy laugh through the rain." Gasps rose as he opened the box and revealed a simple silver ring, delicately set with a stone the color of moonlight. "Eliza," he said, voice soft, "you once stood alone in the storm, and still you stayed kind. Still you gave." He knelt, not just in proposal but as a vow. "I am not offering to rescue you. I am asking to walk beside you. For Noah, for the children still learning how to speak, for the girl I met who already knew what it meant to fight." Tears rolled silently down Eliza's cheeks as she took Noah's tiny hand, placing it in Gabriel's palm. Then she nodded, unable to find words. Yes. Yes to more than love. To building something, lasting. Something loud enough to drown out a past that once tried to define her. The crowd erupted in applause, not for a spectacle, but for a truth too rare in the world of polished speeches and hidden deals. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind the treetops, the playground filled with music and laughter. Gabriel sat on a bench, Noah curled beside him, giggling as Eliza spun gently with a group of children under strings of glowing lights. She looked back at them, her family, not because she had been saved, but because they had chosen each other. As twilight wrapped the center in gold, the three of them walked hand in hand across the grass, past the swing set where, a year ago, her dignity had been stripped away. But tonight, her name was on the wall, her purpose echoed in every child's laughter. And beneath a sky no longer watching in judgment, Eliza whispered to Noah, "You will never be told again that you do not belong." They walked on, three silhouettes under string lights, feet soft in the grass, carrying a story not of what was lost, but what had finally been found. If this story touched your heart, the courage of a single mother, the quiet strength of a man who chose justice over convenience, and the power of love that lifts us from shame to dignity, then you are in the right place. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we believe in tales that heal, that honor resilience, and remind us all of the light we can be for one another. If you felt something today, if a tear formed or a smile crept in, do not let this be the last moment we share. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories and join a growing family of souls who still believe in love, kindness, and second chances. Because every heart deserves to be heard, and every story like Eliza's deserves to be remembered.